It's a story with everything: controversy, brainwashing claims, celebrity connections, and even a $50 million jet. We'll explore the life of Sun Myung Moon, his rise to religious leadership, and the practices of the Unification Church, otherwise known as the Moonies. But were they just a misunderstood religion or something more sinister? Join me as we separate the Kool-Aid from the truth with a refreshing moon mocktail, or cocktail, in hand, of course. Welcome to Capers and Cocktails, a true crime podcast that doesn't take itself too seriously and gives you something to enjoy while you listen. The following content may be disturbing to some. Discretion is advised. If you're enjoying one of our themed cocktails, ensure you're of legal drinking age and have fun, but drink responsibly. Young Myung Moon, who would eventually be known as Sun Myung Moon, was born on January 6, 1920, in what is now the North Pyongan province of North Korea. At the time, Korea was actually under Japanese rule. He was born into a farming family as the second of 13 children, 8 of whom survived to adulthood. Sun Moon, and yes, we're going to call him Sun because he spells it like he is both the sun and the moon. Yeah. And his family were Confucianist until he was around 10 years old. Then his family converted to Christianity and they joined the Presbyterian Church. Sun says that he had a religious vision of Jesus when he was 16 years old, and that vision laid out his entire life's mission. Sun said that when Jesus appeared to him, he anointed him to carry out his unfinished work by becoming the parent to all of humanity. More on that parent stuff a little later on. When Sun was 21 in 1941, he started college at Waseda University in Tokyo, Japan. While a student there, he was also cooperating with the Communist Party members in the Korean independence movement against Imperial Japan. He returned to Seoul in 1943 and married his first wife, Sun Kil Choi, in 1944. They had one son together, whom they named Sung Jin Moon. During this time of his life, Sun was attending a church whose leader taught that he had been tasked by Jesus with bringing the gospel of a new Israel to every corner of the globe. Sun evidently took that teaching to heart, only actually just applying that belief to himself. He had that teenage vision. It was around this time that Sun changed his name to Sun in an effort somehow to squelch the resentment of other Christians against him, which was growing by the day as Sun began gathering his own followers. I truly do not know how changing your name to Sun does that, but that is what he did. Okay. We've got to hop out of the biography for a second for a little Asian history lesson. So at the end of World War II, Korea was divided into 2 zones of occupation, the Soviet-backed North and the American-backed South. In the North, the Soviet Union installed Kim Il-sung as the leader, who later became the founding leader of North Korea. Kim Il-sung almost immediately implemented policies that severely suppressed religious practices, including Christianity. This regime's attitude toward Christianity and religion in general stems from its ideology of Juche, which emphasizes self-reliance, nationalism, and the glorification of the state and its leaders. Christianity, with its emphasis on loyalty to God above else, is seen as undermining the loyalty and devotion that the regime seeks from its citizens. As a result, the North Korean government implemented strict measures to control or eliminate religious practices, including Christianity, within its borders. Starting in the late 1940s, hundreds of North Korean Christian religious figures disappeared, some into concentration camps and some forever. And Sun had started his own movement in Pyongyang in 1946. It wasn't long before the Soviet-controlled North Korean government imprisoned and, he claims, tortured him. The exact reason for his arrest is debated, but it's safe to say that a guy who thinks he's both the sun and the moon may have something that the North Korean government was not too happy about. He was released and then arrested in 1948 for more of the same. This time, he was sentenced to 5 years at Hungnam labor camp. Lucky for Sun, with the outbreak of the Korean War on June 25, 1950, Sun was liberated from the labor camp by United Nations troops. He would say he traveled by foot for 332 miles to Busan, South Korea. That's about 5 days of straight walking nonstop. So I guess if he took a long time, more than 5 days, maybe he did walk all that way. Who knows? Unsurprisingly, after his time with the North Korean government, Sun flipped it and became a lifelong anti-communist. According to Sun's beliefs and preaching, divided Korea was the main front in the Cold War between democracy and communism, which was seen as the last battle between God and Satan. Sun and Choi divorced sometime in the mid-1950s, and he moved to Seoul to continue his ministry. He would be arrested 2 more times. Both of these subsequent arrests, one for evading the draft and another for allegedly participating in a religious orgy, were later dropped. In 1954, Sun formally founded the Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World, Christianity, and Soul. In the 1950s, Sun quickly drew lots of young followers who helped build the foundations of his church-affiliated businesses and cultural organizations. They all, are you surprised, started living together communally. There we go. At his new church, Sun preached a conservative, family-oriented value system and his interpretation of the Bible. And the total number of his followers soared from an initial group of 100 to around 10,000 in just a few years. 17-year-old Hak Ja Han became Sun's second wife on April 11th, 1960. Sun was 40. The ceremony they had is referred to as the Holy Marriage. Hak, from that point forward, was known as Mother or True Mother to the followers of the Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity, the Moonies. We're going to call them the Moonies from now on. For what it's worth, the Moonies do not call themselves the Moonies. They call themselves the Unification Church, but they're the Moonies. They follow the sun and the moon himself, after all. Sun and Hak are called the true parents, and their family is called the true family. You see, according to the Moonies, the purpose of creation is to experience the joy of love. Adam and Eve, however, sinned by misusing love through, having sex, and failed to realize God's purpose. In the wake of their failure, selfish love has dominated human existence, and God has sought to restore his original plan. God's efforts at restoration included sending Jesus to earth. Jesus was believed to be the second Adam, whose role was to form a perfect family by uniting with the ideal wife. This union was meant to create a pure family, which would have started humanity's liberation from sin. However, because Jesus was crucified before marrying, he was able to redeem humanity spiritually, but not physically. So, we need someone else to step in and redeem humanity physically. Who better than the sun and the moon himself? And so the responsibility for physically linking married couples and their families to God was believed to fall on the true parents, Sun and Hak. The true parents would go on to have 12 children, or one for each disciple, according to the Moonies. So now this idea comes to fruition. Sun needs to marry lots of people, and he does, in giant ceremonies called the Holy Marriage Blessing Ceremony, or the Blessing. Why? Well, because according to Frank Kaufman, a leading Moonies scholar, quote, "Our matchings and weddings are a direct and perfect manifestation of a profound theology and worldview. You see, unificationists believe that all the problems on earth, from the Gulf War to child abuse to the crumbling school system, you name it, are fruits of the fact that self-interest crept into the family, the love between husband and wife, reproductive affairs, and parent-child relationships. Thus, since the beginning, there has never been even one family whose members were not dominated by some significant degree of self-interest," end quote. Through the blessing, the couple is embraced into God's spotless bloodline, separated from the sinful human race. So the couple's marriage and any offspring produced after the blessing are not bound by the effects of original sin. Blessed children, second generation, third generation, etc., refers to the offspring of blessed central families. Sun would match couples who were of different races and nationalities because he believed that all of humanity should be united. According to him, quote, "International and intercultural marriages are the quickest way to bring about an ideal world of peace. People should marry across national and cultural boundaries with people from countries they consider to be their enemies, so that the world of peace can come that much more quickly," end quote. Sounds great, right? I mean, yeah, until we're doing this with people who have never met. Matching allowed the Messiah of the Moonies, the sun and the moon himself, to marry people from various nations who had never met before. The couple was told that the Messiah had selected them specifically to be his or her spouse. Some of them waited until the marriage day to view their prospective spouse, aka the first time they ever even saw each other was the day they were getting married. And then the very public holy marriage blessing ceremony with you and 60,000 of your closest friends. But that's a little later on. 36 couples participated in the first marriage ceremony in 1961 for members of the early church in Seoul. Today's drink, well, I had to. It's a modern concoction that I've gotten from the Difford's Guide for Discerning Drinkers. You have to drink their drinks with your pinky in the air if you didn't know. Anyway, I've linked the drink in the sources, which I usually do, by the way, even if I've altered it some. Today's drink is altered because it uses a brand name peach liqueur, and we're not about that life. Little bottles of the cheap stuff, people, you know the deal. Anyway, this drink is called the Moon. That's it. That's the whole story. To make the Moon cocktail, take 2 parts gin, half a part sherry, half a part peach liqueur, and half a part simple syrup, and add that to a shaker. This drink you're going to stir to combine and then strain into a glass with fresh ice. Shaken, not stirred. For the moon mocktail, add 2 parts non-alcoholic gin, half a part apple cider vinegar, half a part peach juice, and half a part simple syrup to a shaker. And stir, stir, people, stir. Strain over fresh ice and drink, pretending it's the eclipse all over again, but not cloudy. The Divine Principle, or Exposition of the Divine Principle, was written by Sun and another early disciple and was published in 1966. It was translated into English in 1973. Considered canonical by the Moonies, the book lays out the foundation of unification theology. In keeping with the structure of systematic theology, it covers 3 main points. 1, God's purpose in creating humans. 2, the fall of man. And 3, restoration, which is God's ongoing effort throughout history to address the consequences of the fall and return humanity to its rightful place. The Moonies believe that God is the originator of all that is good, beautiful, and true, and possesses a masculine and feminine essence. All things, including humans in the cosmos, are reflections of God. As key interpretive concepts like give and take action and subject and object position, we may see that the self is created to be an object for God. Giving God the glory is why we're here. In 1971, Sun moved to the United States, which he had first visited in 1965, but he kept his South Korean citizenship and also kept a house there. While here, he asked his church members to support Richard Nixon during the Watergate scandal. Praying and fasting for 3 days in front of the United States Capitol, church members demonstrated their support for Nixon under the motto, "Forgive, love, and unite." As a public expression of gratitude for their support, Nixon held a reception for Sun on February 1st, 1974. Because of this, the church came into view for the media and the general public. So, Sun took great advantage of this and gave a series of public speeches to audiences in the United States, Japan, and South Korea. The largest 2 were a rally in 1975 against North Korean aggression in Seoul and a speech at an event organized by the Unification Church in Washington, D.C. Sun also bought a newspaper. When the Washington Times was founded in 1982, it had the financial backing of one Sun and the Moon. By 2002, it was reported that Sun had invested approximately $1.7 billion to support the newspaper, which he called, quote, the instrument in spreading the truth about God to the world, end quote. And I mean, I couldn't find any Washington Times exposés on Sun or his Moonies, so I guess there was probably a reason for all those investments. Sun was found guilty in the U.S. in 1982 of conspiracy and tax evasion after the IRS conducted an investigation. Sun had filed false federal income tax returns totaling less than $8,000. In a divided ruling on appeal, his conviction was affirmed. Sun received a fine of $15,000 along with an 18-month imprisonment. After serving 13 months at the Federal Correctional Institution at Danbury, he was released to a halfway house based on his excellent behavior. After serving his time in jail, Sun officially declared himself to be humanity's Messiah, and he formally adopted the name Messiah in 1992. 1997 was one of the largest blessing ceremonies held by Sun, where 30,000 couples took part, including Baptist minister and civil rights advocate Al Sharpton and his wife, Catherine. In fact, throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, Sun and Hawk flew all over the world, mass marrying people from North Korea to Madison Square Gardens to the front steps of the UN headquarters in New York City. Sun hosted a United Nations conference in 2000, which suggested creating a religious assembly or council of religious representatives within the structure of the United Nations. Sun was the sponsor of the inaugural international club soccer competition, the Peace Cup, in 2003. Pele, who has been voted the greatest soccer player of all time, visited with Sun at the occasion. Sun released his autobiography titled As a Peace-Loving Global Citizen in 2009, and it became a bestseller in Korea and Japan. By 2010, Sun had delegated to his offspring, who were in their 30s and 40s, much of the management of the Moonies' religious and commercial activities. On August 14, 2012, after having pneumonia earlier in the month, Sun was admitted to St. Mary's Hospital at the Catholic University of Korea in Seoul. By August 15th, he was on a ventilator. Suffering multiple organ failures, he was transferred to a church-owned hospital near his home in Gapyeong, northeast of Seoul. Sun Myung-moon died on the morning of September 3rd, 2012. He was 92 years old. In his memory, there was a 2-week period of mourning. Tens of thousands of Moonies attended his burial service on September 15th, following which the deceased was interred at a house owned by the church in Gapyeong. Since her husband's death, Hak Ja-han Moon has assumed leadership of the Moonies, and they still call her True Mother and Mother of Peace. Okay, but Jessica, this doesn't sound that bad. It sounds like something that if we're not careful, we may call a cult when it's actually just a religion. First of all, the Moonies do not think the Moonies are a cult. I mean, yes, of course, people in cults do not think they're in cults. That's kind of the point. However, something unusual I found in my research is that a lot of former Moonies do not consider the Moonies to be a cult. That almost never happens. And this fact has really got me thinking about the differences between an early religion and a cult. I think it's important that we're careful when we use the word cult. Remember, we can't just deem something a cult because we disagree with it. And lots of religious practices have been seen as cult-like throughout history. Sometimes you need history to be the judge of these groups. But the Moonies have been around for a long time. In fact, they're celebrating their 70th anniversary of being officially a church this year. Scholars from both the Jewish and Christian faiths have refuted Son's claims to be the Messiah and the second coming of Christ. Protestant denominations in South Korea, including Son's own Presbyterian church, denounced the divine principle as heretical. Ecumenical organizations in the U.S. condemned the divine principle on the grounds that it was not Christian. Commentators who identify as Protestants have also attacked Son's beliefs, claiming that they run counter to the Protestant concept of redemption via faith alone. And Son did not get his $50 million jet. Yeah, he had a $50 million jet from sales from his autobiography, okay? The Moonies are a large global organization worth billions of dollars. They have business interests ranging from a Brazilian football club to a Californian chinchilla ranch. For decades, Japanese Moonies have sold spiritual goods, such as expensive ginseng tea or miniature stone pagodas produced by church-affiliated enterprises in Korea. Tak Ji-il, a professor at Busan Presbyterian University, would say, quote, "It's a business based on religion," end quote. And another tick on the Are We a Cult list, they allegedly engage in brainwashing techniques. From 1973 to 1986, at least 400 members were abducted by their family members and forced to undergo deprogramming. I wonder if that Ted guy was there. Former Moonie Rick LaMartina would say, quote, "It's satanic to doubt. And if you have questions, you go to your immediate superior, and he always talks you into thinking the right way again," end quote. And what's the right way? Well, Son opposed homosexuality and compared gay people to, quote, "dirty dung-eating dogs," end quote. I'm sorry. He preached that gays will be eliminated in a purge on God's orders. So nice, so nice. Son has also been criticized for his advocacy of a worldwide automatic theocracy, as well as for advising his followers that they should become crazy for God. Lots of people really dislike the Moonies and their holy weddings. And in fact, a 1970s Massachusetts bumper sticker read, "Save the human race, punch a Moonie in the face." In 1978, a British newspaper called the Daily Mail wrote a story titled "The Church That Breaks Up Families." The article claimed that the Moonies were brainwashing people and splitting up families. The director of the British Moonies, Dennis Orme, sued the Daily Mail. The court case lasted 6 months, making it one of the longest in British history. Dennis and the Moonies lost the case and the appeal, and they were not allowed to take their case to the House of Lords. During the trial, 117 people, including an American anti-cult psychiatrist, gave evidence. The Moonies had to pay Associated Newspapers £750,000 in costs, which was confirmed on appeal. The jury also asked the Attorney General to look into whether the Unification Church should be considered a charity and tax-free. After a thorough investigation from 1986 to 1988, the church's tax-free status was not taken away. Today, it's not so clear how many Moonies there are. We do know the church has a presence in approximately 100 countries around the world. And get this, although its membership has fallen in recent years amid allegations about followers being pressured into giving large donations that forced some into bankruptcy, they do estimate the number of worldwide Moonies at 3 million. It's not really close to the 2.4 billion Christians on the earth, but it's definitely more than zero, which some, including a lot of those Christian leaders, believe it should be. But you see, the Moonies are not as straightforward as a Kool-Aid drinking, weapons stockpiling, talking to the aliens kind of cult that we're used to on Capers and Cocktails. It's almost a little hard to see the difference between a sun and the moon and a Joel Osteen. Well, except for the whole Son is the Messiah himself thing. Michael Breen, a former Moody, had this to say, quote, "All religions begin as cults. People have always feared these groups because by definition, they are radical. But in my experience, the Moonies are very nice people. And you can leave any time you want," end quote. Thanks for hanging out with me. You should really try this drink if you want. Both the mocktail and the cocktails are pretty good if I do say so myself. As a reminder, the drink recipe is in the description box. It's free, bonus. Speaking of the description box, if you're having a virtual happy hour or birthday party soon, book me to do a live show for you. I can tell this story or any one you'd like. The link to the booking page is also in the description box. Next week is a skipped upload, but the week after that, we're talking about more of a prank than a crime, but it turns out that's actually quite illegal, so I guess it is a crime and a prank. Anyway, I hope you were able to work through those mental gymnastics with me. I'll see you in 2 weeks, and remember, there are always alternatives to joining a cult. Yes, that's the outro.